Hi there, welcome to today's video. I'm Jeanette with Vivo Vintage Designs. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I'm glad you're here. On this channel, we learn alcohol ink, watercolor, and other creative art projects together. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's get started. Hi friends, today we are going to be painting a pot full of cacti. For this painting, I'm using my Mei Liang watercolor paints and my silver black velvet brushes. I'm also using my Etcher cold press 100% cotton sketchbook. And you can see very lightly I have sketched out a pot full of cacti. And this painting was inspired by my neighbor's cacti. She wanted some. We went to Home Depot and she bought a few pots, and while helping her move them, I ended up with a couple of those little spikes in my finger, which were really difficult to remove because they were so tiny but so annoying. Anyway, between a little tape and tweezers, I managed to get them out, but they were so pretty that it inspired this painting. So to start with, I am going to add some water. I'm going to use the wet and wet technique for the center cacti or center cactus. I'm not sure, but I added the water, and then you can see on my palette that I've mixed a few different greens, and I'm not going to tell you what colors I'm using because you may not have this palette. You just have to mix a few different greens because you want each cactus to be different than the one next to it so that they stand out individually. If you use the same color for all of them, you won't have the definition that you need for this painting. So once I added that light green, you'll see that I'm going to skip around from one to the other because I don't want to paint next to one that's still wet because the color will bleed from one into the other. So for this small one, I didn't use the wet and wet technique because it's such a small area. I only use that for the larger areas. So you can see here I'm adding a different shade of green, and I'm basically going to outline the cactus, and then I'll clean my brush off and blend the color into the center. I'm also waiting for the first cactus that I painted to dry a little bit, and then I'm going to go back and add a little deeper shade of green to create a little shadow and some detail. So you can see I've picked up the darker shade of green and I'm adding it to the outside, and then I'm going over the lines that I drew for this cactus, and later on we'll be adding those spikes. But this just gives you a little added detail. We're keeping this really simple. And you'll see that I'm just picking up some greens from the palette. I'm not even sure what colors I'm using. I just want to make sure that they're all different colors or different shades of green. You'll also notice that I'll be adding some yellow or different greens to the colors that I've already mixed on my palette. Again, just trying to create different shades. So I'm going to continue with this technique throughout the painting of adding color, waiting for it to dry a little bit, and then going back with a deeper shade, adding some detail and some shadow to each of the cactus or cacti. I'm not sure, in this painting. You can see that on the right hand side, I've accidentally stuck my hand in the paint and transferred the paint onto the background of this painting. And won't be the first time that I do it. I'll do it again. You'll see that shortly on the bottom right hand side. But I did try to lift the color, but some colors are staining and not easy to remove. But later on in this video, you'll see what I did to try and fix that. And while I do enjoy using these paints, the only thing that I don't like about this palette is that the part that contains or holds the little pans in the palette is made of plastic and it doesn't lay flat. So I have to be really careful not to accidentally transfer the color onto my hand and then onto the paper. So you can see in just a moment, you'll notice when I lift my hand that I did get some red on the bottom right hand corner of the paper. So now to paint this part of these cacti, I used yellow, and then I painted the entire area with the yellow, and then I added a lighter shade of orange, and then at the base I added a deeper shade of an orangey red. And then I used my brush to move the color around and blend those colors together. Now here I'm painting the pot, and I am using the wet and wet technique. So I added the water, and I've mixed a couple of colors to, I want this pot to look like it's terracotta, and I don't really have a color on the palette like that. So I did blend a couple of, or rather mix some browns and oranges to create this color. So you can see that I am now adding a deeper, darker shade of brown around the edges of the pot and the rim, because the cacti would be casting a shadow over that rim, and I want my shadow to be on the left hand side, so I'm making that side a little bit darker. And then I'm just going to add a couple little touches here and there, and then I'm going to leave it alone and let the watercolor do its thing. Now at the top of this cactus I added a flower, so I'm using this pinkish red to paint each petal individually, and then I'm going to pick up some purple and add it to the base of each of the petals, just to add a little shadow. So here I'm painting the last petal. You can see I'm adding that pink, and then I'm adding the purple to the bottom of that petal. Now to try and fix this background, because like I said, I could not remove the paint that I transferred onto the background. What I'm going to do is I am going to wet down the entire area with clean water. And then I'm going to add colors that are similar to the colors that I accidentally transferred onto the paper to kind of blend and mix and cover up my mistake. So you can see I'm adding yellow to the background now, and I did extend the water all the way around so that the color that I'm adding will blend in softly. And you can see that one yellow dot there just does not want to disappear. And now I'm covering up the red by adding a little bit of this orange, deep orange around it. And that kind of covered that area up, but that yellow spot did not want to go away. And I probably fiddled with this longer than I should have. So you can see I'm picking up a little bit of a darker shade of the orange and still trying to cover up that one dot. Finally, I decided to give up on it and just ignore it. So now I'm adding some shadow, and I'm using Payne's Gray for that. The paper is still wet, so that's why you see it blending in nicely. And I'm adding a heavier consistency around the bottom of the pot. And then I'm going to let that blend in naturally. Sometimes the less you fiddle with something, the better it looks. So now that the painting is completely dry, this is the fun part for me. I'm using my micron pens to outline every element of the painting. And I'm using a micron pen with a very fine nib. I don't want thick, heavy lines for this. And of course, you don't have to outline yours, but I really do like the way this looks. And because I use a really fine tip, it doesn't jump out at you. And here I'm creating those thorns or spikes on the cactus. And this marker that I'm using, I think this is a 003 because I wanted these to be very fine. So you can see that I'm just following the lines that I painted in earlier, and I am flicking the micron pen to create the spikes and kind of like in a star shape. Now here I started with that same fine tip, but I decided that I wanted these to be a little bit thicker. So I switched to, I think this is a 02. And you can see that these are a little bit thicker and a little bit darker. And when you're creating your spikes, make sure to add them along the edges also, not just on the inside. And it's really important to make sure that you flick the fine liner so that the tips of the spikes are, they taper. If you just draw a line, it's going to be a blunt edge and it's not going to look very realistic. So I'm going to alternate between these two size nibs to create the spikes. What are these called? Are they thorns? Are they spikes? I don't know. Now the ones with the orange ball on top, they didn't have like a pattern of thorns on them. They were just everywhere. And those are the ones that I actually got on me and were so difficult to remove because they were so tiny. So here I'm using the smaller nib, the smallest nib. Again, I think it's a 003. And I'm just flicking the marker and creating these short little lines, making sure to go around the outside as well. And I'm filling in almost the entire circle. And then I'll add those same little spikes on the cactus itself. While you watch me finish this up, I'll remind you that all the products used are listed in and linked in the description box, and if I remember, I will add them to the comments section so that they're easier for you to find. And if you enjoy these tutorials, perhaps you'll consider subscribing. I post 1 to 2 videos a week. And you can click on that notification bell so that you don't miss any upcoming videos, and consider joining our Facebook group, Vivo Vintage Design Tutorials. Well, this is the finished painting. I hope that you enjoyed it and give it a try. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.